legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reade came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer. And knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers. And knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character. That his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bears their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tara Reade. It's Politics of Survival. Here we are. Can't even say the title. I'm a little tired. I know you haven't seen me in 2 weeks, but as you know, I'm doing the producer job with Kim Iverson's show, which is exclusively on Rumble. You can check her out. It's awesome. It's 5 days a week. So I'm adjusting to my new schedule. So thanks for your patience and thanks for hanging in with me. I noticed that I've been getting more and more views and sign-ins to my Rumble account. I really appreciate that. I want to support Rumble because they are censor-free. I'm also on YouTube, Twitch, Rockfin, I think live on other things. So it's really wonderful. But I know it's been a while since we've talked. So we have a really great show tonight. I'm going to start out with some big news that just happened regarding my case. Those of you that know what happened to me when I was a staffer for Joe Biden. So we're going to start with that, and then we're going to bring in the folks from United East Palestine to talk about what's happening there, because the mainstream media sure isn't talking about it. So we need to, and we need to get their voices heard. So let's start. You're going to see this video here with Matt Gaetz, who made an announcement about my case. Here we go.
Might not be the only person answering questions about prior conduct. There is news regarding Tara Reade. Now, as you may remember, Tara Reade is the former Senate staffer of then Senator Joe Biden, and she made allegations that he violently sexually assaulted her in the Capitol building while she was trying to physically resist him, that he did very terrible things to her. And so she put out a tweet recently that got some attention. Here's the tweet for those listening. "So I'm not a former porn star, nor did I receive hush money. I was a Senate staffer for Joe Biden when he sexually assaulted me in 1993. To date, no investigation, only media attacks and trolls aimed at me. I ask again to @MTGreen and @Matt Gaetz, when will Joe Biden be investigated? Thanks." Congresswoman Green saw this tweet and she felt as though we ought to get the answers. Now, no person's allegation should ever be taken at face value. There has to be review. There has to be corroboration. I took particular note in this matter that Tara Reade's mom had actually called into Larry King Live to talk about her daughter's experience as a staffer being sexually assaulted by a powerful man. That seemed to be some real-time acknowledgement that a bad thing had happened here. And so Congresswoman Green brought this to me. She brought it to the chair of the Oversight Committee, Jamie Comer, and Chairman Comer told Congresswoman Green that we would be fully authorized to bring in Tara Reade, to take her transcribed interview, to get the facts, and to understand what really happened with Joe Biden and this allegation of violent sexual assault against an employee, against a staff member. So Marjorie Taylor Greene tweets back, Tara, thank you for bravely speaking out about such a horrible sexual assault you endured by your boss, then Senator Joe Biden, as a young staffer. It's time to take a stand against the two-tiered injustice system. At Rep. Matt Gaetz and I would like to invite you to come to Washington to speak with us. We will be in touch very soon. So there you have it. There you have the news. Tara Reade will be coming in to give a transcribed interview. We will get the facts. That is the plan now. Oversight Chairman Jamie Comer has blessed this to Congresswoman Green directly, and that is why we are endeavoring to follow the facts. Isn't that a good thing, to actually look at the facts, evaluate the evidence, work to corroborate claims that are made, and ultimately attempt to achieve a just result? That is what we ought to do.
Well, there you go. So I have been in contact with their people, and we are going to be moving forward, and there will be an investigation. I know that the Democrats are trying to block it. Representative Connolly spoke to The Hill and actually slandered me. He's a Democrat from Virginia, and the Democrats are already trying to block me being able to testify. Hopefully, there won't be too much more resistance, and I'll be able to go under oath and to testify. So I'll keep you all posted. I've waited a long, long time, and it's been years, and I really appreciate those of you in the audience who have followed me the last few years. And then, of course, this happened in 1893. So it's been a long time, and I don't know what kind of justice will be served, but just to go under oath and be able to tell what happened is very meaningful. And so I'm very appreciative to Representative Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene for going ahead and bringing this forward, despite a lot of resistance from the Democratic Party. So on that note, I will keep you all informed. And now we're going to move on to something that's really important that I've been watching. As you know, I work as a producer in the Kim Iverson show. I mentioned that earlier. And I had, Kim thought this was very important too. And we had the United for East Palestine Representative Jenna on, and we have them both here today. So we're really lucky tonight, and we can do a deep dive into what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, with the derailment that happened February 3rd that has caused such a huge damage, especially when they set the train on fire. So let's bring in Jenna and Alex from United East Palestine Group, which is, and then we'll go ahead and put the link down. You can find it in the video description. So if they have a GoFundMe, it's not a GoFundMe, excuse me. I'll let them explain it. It's a fund box, but it's a way to fund and help the residents there in East Palestine. So without further ado, hello, Alex. Hello, Jenna. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with, either one of you. Now, Alex, do you live, or did you live in East Palestine, Ohio, or near there?
No, I don't even think I've ever been to Ohio. I reached out to Jenna and Emily, who are the co-founders of the Facebook group United for East Palestine, Ohio, around the time, I think maybe around week 2 or 3. I found out about this pretty early on because I'm a Solidarity member with Railroad Workers United, so I get their newsletter. And so I found out about this like the day after it happened, and I was just trying to see if I could help. I reached out to them because I wanted to see if I could help with organizing mutual aid network to try and get people out and resources in, which is why I originally reached out. And then we just kind of became a team and have been doing some really, I think, awesome work. So it's just been a pretty crazy wild ride, but super grateful to have Jenna and Emily and everybody else who's come on, Professor Welton, Aaron Bragg, etc.
Well, okay, so I want to start backwards just because there may be people in the audience, because the mainstream media is really not covering this disaster very well. They did for like a week or two, but that's it. So Jenna, I'm going to have Reef bring up a picture. Let's show the train derailment. And I know, Jenna, that you were in a neighboring town. Could you describe what, and there the audience can see the picture of just how that was. Describe what happened and how the toxins got released, the fire and all of that. If you could go into that and what happened with the residents initially.
Sure. So on February 3rd, that's when the train originally derailed. I think when the train derailed, there was a fire, and there was some immediate evacuation to people that were in the general vicinity of where the train was. And then I think like when it had first happened, we knew that people were evacuated because of the fire, but nobody really knew what was on any of the train cars until I think it came out a couple days later that there was like some different chemicals in the train car, and there was apologies, there was a chance that they could explode. And so then there was a decision made to just burn them, like on purpose. So burn them on purpose. And I'm going to give it to you, Alex, so I can stop them.
Okay. So the summation of it is there are a lot of inconsistencies with what should have happened and what actually wound up happening, from the perspective of anybody everybody we have spoken to with any knowledge of how these types of chemicals should be transported, what should happen if they're ever set on fire, etc. For example, the vinyl chloride, when it is being shipped, is shipped in liquid form, and it ossifies, I think is the word, but basically when it reaches room temperature, it goes directly from a solid form to a gas. So what happened was, as it was burning, because of the chemical nature of vinyl chloride, from everything we know, that how it had a hole in it and was burning, what should have been happening is it would have gotten colder instead of hotter. So everyone we've spoken to with any knowledge of how vinyl chloride works, we haven't spoken to a single person with any actual knowledge about how this stuff is shipped and how it functions who says that should have been any risk of it actually exploding. And what we also know is that Norfolk Southern, when asked who made the call to set it on fire, they allude that it was the fire chief. But from all evidence, the fire chief basically said it was their call. They were the ones who made the decision, and basically forced the fire chief with all but basically saying, hey, if you don't give us the okay to set this on fire, your whole town is going to explode. But the problem is, by all available evidence, that was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. And so then we have the question of why they chose to set it on fire. And then, even if we say, for the sake of argument, that there was a valid reason to set that one car full of vinyl chloride on fire, they set 5 cars full of vinyl chloride on fire. Only one had a puncture and was burning. So why did they set the other cars of vinyl chloride on fire? And they set other things beside vinyl chloride on fire, such as frozen vegetables, which is just adding carbon into a stew of burning chloride, which is just going to increase the amount of other compounds that will be synthesized by the fire.
Let me stop you right there for just a second. Audience, could you explain, because vinyl chloride, I mean, I know it's a poison, but could you explain like what that means to release a toxin like vinyl chloride, what that can do to the human body or to animals?
The vinyl chloride by itself, if that was the only thing that had been released, which it wasn't by any stretch, is extremely toxic. And when I say extremely, I'll put it like this: there was a study done by a medical researcher who I think is in Pennsylvania, and we can link it. And she found that while testing mice and giving them what was considered the safe amount of vinyl chloride, exposing that and measuring that they had the safe amount of vinyl chloride in their liver, what she found is that 100% of them died due to cancer. So that's vinyl chloride. In terms of acute exposure, it's one of the most toxic things that a person can be exposed to.
And that's just one of the compounds that were released that day. That's only one, right?
Right. So that the thing is, when you set something on fire, you cause a chemical reaction. And when you set a bunch of things on fire together, you cause a bunch of chemical reactions to happen in a bunch of different sequences. So the vinyl chloride that was set on fire with all those other things, including the paint from the trains, all of the chemicals that were there, when you set them on fire, you cause them to react chemically and create new chemicals that weren't there in the first place. And that's what we're seeing now is it's not just the chemicals that were already in the cars, but all the chemicals that were created by the fire itself.
That's amazing. I mean, that they were so reckless, or it was purposely done, as you said, with intent. So Erin Brockovich made a statement that this is one of the worst disasters she's ever seen. So I want to come back to you, Jenna, for a second. Tell me about the immediate impact to the residents, and if you have an idea of the population of the town, and also how fast did help come, and could you kind of walk people through about, because there's a lot of anger from the residents. I understand they're just not getting answers and not getting help. So could you kind of walk everybody through? Here we have this chemical, this poison that got released, and now animals are dying. We saw that pets are dying, right? So then go from there.
So the town has about like 4,500 residents. So not a giant, it's a village, not a giant location. And then, so when they set the stuff on fire, they did a mandatory evacuation for a mile radius. I'm not sure about how many people that encompasses, but when that happened, the Red Cross came in. So the Red Cross came in, they set up a temporary shelter at the high school, which is like 1.1 miles away. So, right. So the Red Cross came in, they evacuated the people for a couple days. In those couple days, they rebuilt the tracks over whatever spilled on the ground, and then told everybody it was safe to go home and send everybody back home. Right. So they just buried the dirt. There was oil in one of those, like there was oil that spilled also that nobody really talks about. But they didn't even like attempt to dig it up. They just put soil over it, built new tracks. And then my understanding is a train can't run through an evacuated town. And so they had to let the residents come back, and then the train could run again.
Wow.
And so fast forward to like early March, the residents threw up enough of a fuss. Norfolk Southern is now digging up one side of the train tracks at a time to like remove whatever toxins or chemicals or oil that are in the ground. And they've allowed people within a certain radius to temporarily relocate because of how bad it smells. And
we're showing our audience right now, there's a lot of creeks you mentioned in that town, and we're showing the rainbow water, meaning it's just all it looks chemically, right?
Yeah.
Doing that right now. So
there's like nothing alive in those streams. The people are saying that there's things that are living. I was actually just at dinner with Professor Welton from Purdue tonight, and he was like, there's not a thing alive in like Leslie Run, which is one of the areas that he was testing. Like there's no wildlife, no fish, no like whatever would be in a creek. Like there's nothing. He said there's sand, sediment, and water. Like, so creatures aren't living in there.
Wow. So as far as like, there were some initial reports of animal deaths and pet deaths, chicken deaths. Is that still happening? And what is the status of that? Because this is a partial farming community as well. What is going on with that?
Yeah, I know somebody who has a fox rescue, and they've lost a couple foxes. I saw some controversy around the chickens, so I don't know like how true or accurate that was to begin with.
Controversy around chickens? Okay. Well,
yeah.
Go on. Okay.
So, but I did see the chickens that had died really quick, and there have been like smaller animals that have been found dead, deer that have been found dead, just that aren't naturally dead. And in a natural like world where a deer would be found, like if it died, there would be other animals eating it, because that's just how this works. But these deer and like rabbits and stuff that are found dead are like not touched, like they're all intact. And so it's a little bit weird, but nobody will officially say what's connected and what isn't. And so that's where like different science funding and independent testing is necessary. Like we're in a smaller community. It's not like we might not have all of the resources that are needed to determine what did cause deaths of different animals, but it's highly coincidental that it happened around the same time. So I think the biggest concern when it comes to livestock is like the way that like livestock are built genetically, they can withstand a lot more than like specifically like cows, they can genetically withstand a lot more toxins and stuff. Like they have bigger organs, bigger bodies. And so the issue is now like if they're raising these cows for beef, like can people consume it? And nobody, like you can't get the right answers. I actually read a flyer today that was handed out by the Ohio Agriculture Division. And it says if your pet seems sick, take them to the vet.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Really quickly.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
So when Jenna says that deer are dying, I want to paint a clear picture for this for your audience and for you. It's not like deer are just being found randomly laying down in the forest or in someone's garden. The deer are being found in mass laying down dead right in front of the river. So when we talk about, we have a video that was made by a reporter and journalist who came in and showed that beekeepers, their entire hives are dead, like hundreds of thousands of bees. We're not talking about like a bunch of animals dying. What we're talking about is a mass extinction,
right?
And that's not hyperbole. That's 100% accurate. There is a complete die-off of about at least 90% of the animals that live within a certain vicinity, especially those who are drinking from the creeks. In fact, there's a clear direct correlation between any animal who drinks directly from the creek and their deaths, because we can clearly see deer just laying down dead in front of the river, clearly from some kind of poisoning. And fish, obviously, when you have a whole creek full of fish that just die, 40,000 or more of fish and frogs, like the entire biosphere, in terms of animals in that area just dying. It's obviously poisonous. There's no question there's no question that's connected. And then those same deer drink from that fish, that reef, and they die. That's obviously connected as well. So the level of I just want to make it clear that what we're talking about is not like a few one-off deaths. It was a mass extinction that we can clearly correlate it to the area radius around this event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Reef just put up a photo there. I'm just really shocked. There's not more coverage of this. It's such a significant event. And I want to come back to you, Jenna, about now the human impact, because I know that there's been reports of people having really strange rashes and so on. Could you talk about the latest and what's going on with people with illnesses, or any response to that in the local health community? Or is there any kind of alarm about like what's could happen long-term, especially to children, things like that? Anything?
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of rashes, a lot of gastrointestinal issues, a lot of like headaches, fatigue, hospitalizations for like chemically induced pneumonia. And I think the issue that we've heard is that the doctors won't diagnose people with chemically induced anything because they aren't trained to do that. Or they've been instructed not to do that, which is what I've heard the most, is that if they're not within a certain radius, then you shouldn't be diagnosing them with any sort of chemical exposure. The ability to test for dioxins in the blood has become nearly impossible to get in this area. The local labs won't do the test for it. Like even if you have a prescription, they won't run the whatever test it will. You have to test blood and urine for dioxins. And I'm pretty sure you have to do it really quickly because your body will flush it out. That doesn't mean you aren't exposed or can't get the symptoms. We've partnered with a couple doctors, Dr. Galome from California, San Diego, University of California, San Diego. She dealt with some of the Gulf War illness, which has very similar exposure symptoms. And then we've been chatting with some people from Case Western Reserve towards Cleveland about a cancer study that they're going to start to push for funding of, more for the long term versus the short term. The Norfolk Southern set up a makeshift clinic that I guess now is going to stay in the area, and at first didn't even have a doctor or didn't do vitals. And it was really just a PR stunt. But for some reason, that is going to stay forever now, which doesn't make sense because everything's safe and okay. So there's like a lot of contradicting things that happen. And then like when you think about the town itself, it's a little bit divided when it comes to like everything's fine and everything's not fine, because genetically everybody responds to chemical exposure a little bit differently, but the town is continuing as is. There's like an Easter egg hunt planned at the park, which is not far from one of those contaminated creeks where the soil results haven't even come back yet, but we're going to send children to dig around in the dirt for Easter egg. And those are the people that are, I mean, the smaller you are, the more impacted you are by any exposure. So
well, so that leads me to this. You both are active with United for East Palestine. So could you tell our audience just a little bit more about that briefly, and your and what that means and what you're trying to do to kind of solve this access, in other words, access to testing and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it initially started as just a way to like Alex had said, to really rally support from a resources perspective, water, whatever we could get from a community aid perspective is where it started. But as it started to unravel more, and we found how deep and broken the response to this issue is, it's turned more into fighting for the truth. And so we are funding or attempting to fundraise for independent testing. Alex, do you want to elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah. So as Jenna said, that it's kind of warped into sort of our main function is what we're trying to do to give a little bit of perspective on why it's important. So we think of this because this has sort of been branded as the East Palestine train wreck. It happened in East Palestine. So we think of it as East Palestine and Ohio as that's kind of the area that needs to be focused on, and that the people in East Palestine are the ones who've been impacted. But the thing is, chemicals and particulate matter and fallout from toxic chemical explosions don't follow borders or city names. Pennsylvania, for example, is not even 1 mile away from where the train derailed. There are people in Pennsylvania who were just as impacted in the immediate fallout zone as people in East Palestine.
I didn't know that.
Moreover, yeah, that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of, but that's a huge part of the story. There's people in Pennsylvania are just as impacted by this, and most people don't even know that they were even impacted at all. But to a little more in terms of why the testing is so important. So Norfolk Southern, their interest is in making this leave people's minds as soon as possible. It is in minimizing what actually happened, because that minimizes their culpability in any sort of injury. Not just, and I mean, there's obviously the civil lawsuit aspect that's going to happen. They're going to get sued, and they're going to sell out however many tens of millions of dollars they have to. But to them, that's just the cost of doing business. They've already accepted that that's going to happen, I suspect. But the thing is, poisoning someone is a felony. Poisoning a group of people is a group of felonies. A felony for each time you poison them, for each person you try to poison. Poisoning an entire town is terrorism.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about them poisoning a town. We have models and a lot of empirical data that indicates very strongly that this plume of toxic chemicals is impacting literally millions of people. We are getting accounts from people all across the Northeast, from New York to Ontario, Canada, to Connecticut, of the exact same symptoms, of chemical sheen like was in the rivers flowing right from out of the snowmelt in mass in Ontario, Canada. People's pets falling sick, just like the pets are falling sick in East Palestine. There is a large amount of evidence that needs to be looked into, which indicate that Norfolk Southern didn't just poison the people of East Palestine; it poisoned the entire Northeast, and that is something that they know that. Okay, let me backtrack. If that is the case, and there is a large amount of anecdotal evidence to think that it is, they know that, right? So their interest is in preventing that from ever coming out. They don't want any proof, any viable scientific evidence to actually be produced that can prove that. Right now, there's TikToks and there's videos, but there's no credentialed scientific body or academic body producing any data that actually proves it. And as long as that's the case, as far as they're concerned, it didn't happen. So their interest is in preventing that story from being told, preventing any of that from happening, and to minimize the story to as small as they can possibly make it, to make it not Pennsylvania, to make it just about East Palestine, so that any sort of efforts that happen to getting people evacuated, and then even then minimizing those, because they want to keep the story as small as possible, which is why people are smelling these chemicals. And any toxicologist who's honest and has a knowledge, like for instance, Dr. Beatrice Galam, one of the most respected toxicologists, medical researchers in the United States, will tell you that if you can smell a toxic chemical, you are already over the exposure limit. You have already gotten too much into your system. And if you're smelling it day by day by day by day, a lot of those chemicals actually concentrate inside your body. And moreover, besides just the acute injury of being exposed and what those chemicals do on the acute level, there's something called oxidation, which is basically when these chemicals can cause the creation of what they call free radicals, which is when your body, because of a reaction that happens when a chemical that shouldn't be there is exposed to it, it causes your body to start attacking itself, and it can do that in ways that are impossible to predict, from things like diabetes to lupus and all other types of autoimmune disorders. And all of these things are concerns that will need to be watched out for. But as long as they can obfuscate about what is actually happening in the first place, when people start getting sick with these tertiary things, they can say that it's not related. And they will say, prove it. And then the evidence is it's upon them to present the evidence, but they don't have the medical testing, right? So, which is why it's so important for us to find out what chemicals were not just released, not just what chemicals were in the cars, but what chemicals were created in the fire, at what concentration and how much were they released, how far did they go, what's the actual immediate impact zone? Because right now it's looking like it goes all the way from Kentucky all the way to Ontario, Canada, and from Maine all the way to, I don't know, Cincinnati, maybe. I don't know how far east and west, but north and south, we have a fairly good idea, and we have models that show going possibly all the way to Greenland. So this is such a gigantic problem, and we are hearing stories of everybody in that, so many people in that area getting intensely sick, and without the ability to do toxicology reports to find out what's in their blood, to find out they're being exposed, we can't prove that. But if we can get all the data we need to find out exactly what chemicals are in the water and soil around East Palestine or around the train derailment site, what chemicals they made and released in the immediate impact zone, and B, get the sampling and the chemical data of what is coming down in the snow melt or in the snow and the acid rain that is being documented all across there. If we can get that data, get that chemical testing, we can then prove not just a correlation, but a direct causation by saying that these chemicals were released and they're appearing here and here and on the direct time zone. Once we have that, and the time limit for getting that is limited, because a lot of these chemicals break down rather quickly. They're breaking down the snow, they're melting in the snow, and they're breaking down, they're going into the rivers and the creeks, at which point it will become much, much more difficult, if not impossible, to get the samples to prove it. And that's what they want. They want it to become impossible to objectively prove that anything that they are directly responsible. And if you can prove it, then you have the ability to actually hold them accountable, which is what I think needs to happen.
And this is the railroad company itself that needs to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I want to talk about the politics around this, right? I actually titled the show Politics of Derailment for that reason, because there's a lot of politics around this. Jenna talked yesterday about the AP article that came out. I don't know, Reef, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can find the AP article saying that Russian troll voices are lifting up the East Palestine. Oh, you have it. You're so fast. Reef, amazing. You're amazing. Always magical. Say hi, audience. Say hi to Reef. Give him in the chat. Give him a hello. He always makes everybody. He makes the show magically just work so well. Anyway, the AP. Could you read that out, because it's too small for me to see? Reef. Could you read out the headline?
Pro-Russia Twitter troll stoked fear about Ohio derailment, analyst shows. That analysis brought to you by Reset, a Pierre Omidyar group.
Just brought to you by a multi-billionaire. Yep. Right. I mean, I can't even. When I saw that, I laughed so hard because it was so obvious that it was to deflect away. So let's start back, audience who hasn't maybe been following this. When the train derailment happened in February 2nd, there's been a big movement to get, it took weeks to get Pete Buttigieg to show up, the Department of Transportation, and he's been a hot mess. Everybody knows he's not good at what he does. And then when he does show up, he was defensive. The people, the residents there had been applying for federal aid. And of course, the same week that they gave millions, 100 billion plus total, but more millions to Ukraine for Ukrainian pensions, they denied the residents of East Palestine, Ohio, disaster relief. Now, I don't know, Jenna and Alex, you can update me if that status has changed, but that was a while ago. So Donald Trump then made an appearance. So could you all talk about how all of a sudden East Palestine is considered a Trump area, or there's a lot of Trump supporters in that area, and all of a sudden it's discarded kind of nationally, and President Biden to date has not been there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And that impact.
So yeah, it has become, I mean, I'll forever say this is about people, not politics. But it has become a political, maybe stomping ground a little bit. I know there's an election coming up next year. And so if you want to blaze your campaign trail, I guess you go to East Palestine, Ohio, to check on the residents. But I do think that the community, I don't know if they're completely a Trump town, but I do know that they were excited that, a previous or prior former president would come visit when our current one hasn't. Right. But I think President Trump came and he went and nothing has changed. We're still in the same situation that we were before he was here, except for maybe with some extra Trump water. They sent some Trump water and some cleaning supplies. But aside from that, when the people leave, the press leaves, there was a big press station that was set up outside of the high school. And that is completely gone. They have these different open houses is what they're called. versus town halls, and the EPA hasn't been, like, wasn't at the most recent one. And so there's the local mayor is, like, he had a Facebook page with mayor updates or mayor updates. He hasn't done one in 2 weeks. So, like, there's a clear miss from anybody that's in a leadership or political.
Are you getting any money, any disaster relief money from the federal disaster fund? Because I know the initial one was rejected. Has it been same, still rejected?
Still rejected. I know there is
an audience. We just gave last week 350 million more to Ukraine. And then, of course, you mentioned, Jenna, the bank bailouts that happened overnight. So money is there for these residents of East Palestine, Ohio. So everyone listening, we all have railroads running through our area. We all have trucks and semis. I mean, toxic spills can happen anywhere. We're all near water sources. If you're living in America, you're near a creek or a river or a lake. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm near a lot of water all the time, and a lot of big semis and, trains. So this could happen to any one of our communities and also impact our whole region. And as Alex had pointed out, going as far as other states and even as far as Greenland, if it's a plume that's purposely set with a bunch of chemical compounds. So this is really, I mean, I guess what really makes me mad is how the media, AP actually put out that story about the Russian bots. They would actually, rather than talk about the need for helping the residents of that town, trying to solve this problem, what's at the bottom of it, who caused it, who's stopping relief from happening for the people. No, they're going to blame it on Russia. I mean, it's ridiculous, just to change the narrative, to switch the focus, or to make it seem like it's disinformation when people are actually suffering, and it's outrageous. I'm sorry, you hear my cat? My cat brings me socks. Yeah, you're a good boy. He brings me socks. He thinks that while I'm working, he has to work. So but anyway, so a little comic relief from the cat there. But I wanted to say that the other thing I wanted to talk with you about is the whole dynamic of Pete Buttigieg. He came and went, made his appearance, very defensive, angry looking, and then left. But are you able to get any other officials? And I know Erin Brockovich is there. Is she working with your group or with other residents? Is she making any impact? And what is her plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Erin Brockovich has a loud voice. She has experience, but it's also important to know she is connected with a law firm as well. And so through Erin, she does help people and, like, I think, share the big picture of, it's important to be unified and gather and have, be a community that, like, speaks together and is looking for truth and change. But also understand that politicians aren't the only ones with motives. I think if you sign with her firm, it's like 40% take plus 25 cents per piece of paper they have to print or something. So as much as I would like to, like, I think she, like I said, she's very intelligent. She has a very loud voice. It brings attention and it can bring media, but also utilizing caution for anybody who can make a pretty good couple bucks from signing people on into their law firm as well.
So as far as Alex, I wanted to go back to you about this. What we're talking back about the chemicals. So what would be the best case scenario to help a cleanup? Like, what needs to happen right this minute in order for things to get better? Or is this kind of past that point? Have we reached the point of no return here?
First thing is people within the immediate vicinity. And when I say immediate vicinity, I don't mean 1 mile. We did an informal survey, and from the data we have, the immediate vicinity feels for, like, people who are immediately being impacted and getting sick daily is more around 10 miles. So the first thing is evacuate everybody to be safe within the 20-mile zone who wants to leave. The government needs to be very clear with people about the dangers of this, what's happening. So we need to have clarity on what chemicals people are being exposed to, what the dangers are, and what they risk by staying. Then there needs to be funding from the federal government. I don't care if they take it from Norfolk Southern. I don't care if they come out from their own pockets. There needs to be funding from the federal government to get people out, to help them relocate, to make them financially whole, to pay for the lost damages of their homes and all of the chemically, I would say, chemically exposed and polluted furniture, clothing, all of these chemicals. A lot of them sit inside furniture and inside their clothing. If there's accounts that we've had of some, so I've heard someone personally tell me that they smelled someone's couch and then spent the next week nauseous with a gigantic migraine. So a lot of these people's homes, like maybe 100% of it could possibly be condemned. And but what we need is testing. We need rigorous testing and data. We need people to come in with hazmat suits and actually do the sort of testing. We need independent scientists like Professor Welton or perhaps even a board of independent scientists to come in with the proper backgrounds and a rigorously shown to be willing to do actual science and not just the science that serves the interests of the corporations and the government, to come in, find out exactly what the issues are in the immediate zone of like 20 miles. Then we need to get actual modeling. We need to find out where these chemicals actually went, how far they went, not just base a model and say, well, we think that's what happened, but rigorously investigate every single lead we possibly find. That any indication that of where this chemical pollutant went, because these chemicals are extremely poisonous. We don't even know exactly what chemicals were dispersed. Because even if we find out what chemicals are on site, chemicals, because of their nature, some have different weights, so some might move in different areas and others weigh than others. So what we're talking about is a need to get all of those chemicals tested, find out how far they went, what their impact, what their short and medium and long-term impact will be, not just on humans, but on the ecological set, the forests, the rivers, the creeks, the Great Lakes, where this is going over, and what the long-term impacts will be and how to mitigate that. And then we need funding for all the science necessary to figure out how to help heal this. And then we need to get the unions, the railroad workers, the railroad places like the Railroad Workers United, which isn't a union, but is a worker-led organization for making railroads better. And we need to figure out how to make sure that something like this never happens again. And I say that while knowing that in the time this happened, there have already been over a dozen train derailments, some of them with toxic chemicals, in the United States since this happened.
That's so stunning. So when you're talking about the owners of the railroad, who are you talking about? Are they multi-billionaires? Or is there a board of people? Who owns the railroad? Do you know?
Well, the problem is the railroads are privately owned, and they have been for the last 100 years. They were briefly publicly owned during World War I. I think it was World War I or World War II, when they were made public because of the need for war. And then 90% of the railroad workers wanted to stay publicly owned, stay nationalized. When they denationalized, they put it back into the hand of these private organizations, private companies, and that has been the way of it, which is why our rail system is such a joke on the international scale. There is not a single comparatively industrialized society you can go to anywhere on the planet where you will find a rail system as dysfunctional and terrible as ours. And there's no excuse for that. It's purely out of corruption. It's purely out of government laziness, malaise, and the inability of I think the working class. What needs to happen is, because the government is not going to fix this unless they're forced to. Norfolk Southern and in all of the railroad companies are never going to fix this, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to prevent any actual structural change from happening that would hold them accountable or take away their massive profits that they reap. So the only thing that's going to fix this is coordinated, massive structural organizing. Everybody doesn't matter where you stand on the political, what political philosophy you hold. The simple question of, should we have access to clean drinking water? Should we be able to eat things that grow out of our soil? Should we avoid poisoning our forest, our homes, and our farms? These are things that have no political tint, in which I think anyone who is a serious person, or even most non-serious people, would say that, yeah, those are things we should make sure don't happen. Those are things we should make sure we have. So in order to do that, we need to just make a clear-eyed, objective idea of what is needed in order to make sure that these things just don't happen anymore. Every single train that derails because of negligence. Trains are objectively the most efficient and the most safe way for humans and resources to travel from one place to another that was invented since the industrial age. Every train that derails because it's allowed to derail. And we have the full capacity to create a rail system where these things just don't happen because they're not allowed to happen. But the only way we're going to do that is to have take a clear-eyed, objective look at what needs to happen, what would actually need to happen to make sure that we can create a system like that, and then do that. And the only way we're going to do that is by organizing, by getting everybody together, anybody who has an interest in making sure this happens, and us work together.
Well, great points. And I'm glad that you are, trying to create a solution. And I just want to say, before I open this up for questions from the audience, we have down in the below, we have a description. There's a link. Could you describe it's not a GoFundMe, it's another kind of funding link that you have, and where that money goes? Either you or Jenna, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we have a donor box. I think we did some research on which one kept the least amount of dollars. But the donor box is to fund independent scientists and research. A lot of the ones that have been helping us are doing it at, for free, they have no funding themselves. So some of the transparent answers that we have received have collected some bills. So our goal through donor box is to help pay, as for as much as we can, to continue to get residents the answers that they need. And it's the only reason that we have started any sort of fundraising. We actually were really late to the party on fundraising for East Palestine. Everybody else got to it before us, which, like I said, it wasn't our intention. Like, everything kind of shifted once we learned how the reality of the situation. So we started, like I said, the donor box for independent science funding. Underneath the donor box, there's a link to a Google Drive that will show you where, like, once we start dispersing the funds, where exactly they will be going, because we believe in full transparency with any funds that we're collecting, that it's going towards residents getting, wells tested, soil tested, whatever we can bring in from, where whoever can help and support and donate. That's really greatly appreciated. Liking, reposting, retweeting anything on social media that helps get us some attention too. We know that this event has caused some censorship, and so we don't get a lot of engagement on things that are really important. So anytime we can get, a like, a follow, a share, that's all really helpful to get the message out as well.
Great. That's really good. So Reeve, I know you're there. Could you bring up any questions for Alex or Jenna in general before we close the show here?
Yeah, the only one that
I just want to touch.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that in terms of the funding, I just want to reiterate and make clear why the testing is so important. It's really important that people get evacuated. We were originally going to try to raise an evacuation fund. We figured out that amount of money we would need to get the people we need to evacuated would be just like in the outrageous millions of dollars that this would not be possible. So, but by getting the testing and proving there's a problem, because we know there's a problem, but by getting the testing to prove it, that we can show on paper that there's a problem, that is the fastest way that we can think of, and we found, to get people evacuated. So the fastest way to get the government to be open about that there is a problem, to prove there's a problem so people can get evacuated, is by getting the testing done to prove that they need to leave.
Very good. Thank you. All right, Reef, what was the question that you had?
Is there any tangibles that can be sent as well? You know, water filters, things like that. Do you know of any ways people can donate that kind of stuff?
We have a couple nonprofits linked from our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is United for East Palestine. And there are a couple nonprofits with Amazon wish lists. They distribute, air filters, water purifiers. They've collected a lot of water. So there are multiple linked on there. If you can share that link, it's a pinned post at the top of the page with donations. And all of the ones that we have our donor box up there too, but all of those are verified that they will be distributed to community members that are in need. So yes, that's there. Understand that a lot of these nonprofits have been really overwhelmed by outpouring support from our fellow Americans. And so monetary donations are often preferred right now because they just don't have the manpower to handle like huge donations of water and stuff. They had to rent forklifts and all of that kind of stuff that they weren't prepared for.
Well, thank you both for coming. We have your Twitter accounts and of course, all your links down below in the description. So I just want to thank you for your dedication to trying to bring awareness to United East Palestine and, some relief to the people suffering. But this helps. It's not just, helping this community, but it's helping all of us, in our country in general. And this is what citizens need to start doing. Because obviously the government's not going to help. They're going to be protecting corporate dollars. They're going to be protecting these private interests. And so we have to join together to help each other and help ourselves and stay safe. Just as a closing note, if you could give ways people can find you on Twitter, just verbally, and we have it again, we'll have it also in the description. So Jenna and Alex, how they can find you.
Yeah, our Twitter handle is at United for EP. So EP for East Palestine. Most of our social media follows that trend. The only one that doesn't is our Facebook, and that's United for East Palestine.
All right, great. I'm really impressed with both of you. Thank you, Alex, for breaking down kind of the science of the compounds, and Jenna, talking about what, the residents are suffering through. We really appreciate your views. And again, proves this is not a Russian plot. AP's wrong again. This isn't, the Kremlin based, whatever. These are American people suffering in American town and being ignored by the Biden administration and actually everyone. So both Republicans and Democrats. And it's really sad to see corporate interests outweigh citizens' safety for water and soil, being able to farm and live and be in their towns, or even just get answers and get medical assistance. So I'm really glad you both came on, and thank you so much. So audience, I'll be back next Friday with another show, and I really appreciate your follows, hanging in there with me as I was absent for a couple of weeks. It's good to be back. Please check out this organization, United for East Palestine, and try to raise up their story. Like if you see a story about it and their postings, please try to share it and like it. And if you can share some funds with them, please do that as well. All right, everyone. Good night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.